Hey YouTube, I hope that you guys are all doing good. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about trusting your intuition. So intuition is something that's so interesting. Like I feel like everyone has intuition. It's just recognizing it for what it is and knowing how to use it when it's communicating to you. So first off, you're probably wondering, what is intuition exactly? So intuition is basically an inner knowing, and typically that inner knowing is communicated to you in many different ways. It is most of the time communicated to you through your gut. So if you're getting a feeling in your gut, and it can be a feeling such as tingling, a warmth, a force, that's your intuition communicating you. And for some other people, it can also communicate to you through your heart chakra area. So you may feel like warmth, you may feel tingling, you may feel your heart start racing. That can be your intuition communicating to you in different situations. So one of the most important things is to listen to this. I mean, your soul and your higher self is communicating with you. So you have to know that when you're getting these signs and when you're getting these signals, your intuition is trying to tell you something, depending on what situation is happening in that moment, or if there's something that it's leading up to. And typically you're going to have thoughts that are happening in your mind in accordance with these feelings, so you'll know exactly what your intuition is trying to communicate to you. You just have to listen to yourself. Don't think too hard, but just kind of dig deep and say, what's happening right now? Am I going somewhere? Am I driving somewhere? Am I meeting up with someone? Do I have some big assignment coming up? Like, there's always something that you can think about that you can tie the intuitive feelings into. There's always synchronicity. So essentially, you want to ask yourself, how do you feel when you're around certain people? Or how do you feel when you're going certain places? How do you feel when you do certain things? How do you feel when someone responds to you, right? Go off those feelings that you're feeling within your gut or within your heart, and they're actually going to tell you, they're going to basically line up to deeper aspects of the situation. They're going to tell you a lot more than what you realize on the surface. And as I said before, a lot of the times this has always been here, and then later on we end up realizing it, and we'll say, oh, you know what, I kind of felt that way before, I thought this, but we're not 100% recognizing it or validating it as being our intuition. We're just saying, I had a thought. No, you didn't have a thought. You already knew it, and it was already there, but you just didn't register and accept it as such, right? Because maybe you weren't aware of your intuition. So that's the cool thing about being more aware, being more in tune with it, is that in a lot more situations you're going to have the upper hand. Not saying that you're going to be getting over, but you're going to be a lot more knowledgeable and enlightened on what's happening, because you're going to know, okay, I can trust myself. My higher self, my soul is going to be communicating with me on what's happening, right? So I want to give you guys two stories where intuition ties in for me. So the first story that I'm going to give you is essentially, I was at a restaurant in Sedona, Arizona. It was my first time visiting there, and that's one of the places that's always been on my bucket list. This was about last year, actually, 2019. And I was in Sedona, and I was at this Mexican restaurant. I'm like, I'm about to get some good food, get some enchiladas, some green chili sauce. So I'm stopping at this restaurant. I go in, I'm seated, and the restaurant's nice, everything's cool, the people around me are cool. Like, these two ladies were stopping to have a chat with me. I'm talking to them. They're from Phoenix on the west side, and they're coming to visit Sedona also. They've always wanted to see it. They're like road tripping together, but chat with them. And after that, like, I just had this weird feeling in my gut. Like, it was almost like when your stomach starts turning, and for some reason I kept feeling that, and I also kept seeing the waiter in my mind. And I was thinking, like, am I about to get a bad waiter? And I was thinking, you know what, maybe you're just nervous, you're here by yourself, just kind of let the feelings go and see what happens. So the waiter comes out, and he sits the chips down, salsa and chips, and he's like, all right, like, what do you want? And I look at him, and I'm like, I give him the face, and like, he kind of realized. He's like, well, he was like, let me give you a few minutes. I'm like, yeah, give me a few minutes to look at the menu, and I'll get back to you. And I was just like, did that really just happen? Like, I've never had a waiter or waitress greet me like that. So I said, maybe he's having a hard day, whatever. So I'm just like, that's interesting. I keep putting it in the back of my head. I don't focus on it. I keep it moving, and I get my order together, and I figure out what I'm gonna get. And then he comes back, place my order in. it took him a while to give me that. Like, it took him maybe about 25 minutes to bring out my enchiladas. 25 minutes later, he brings them to me, and they're warm. They're not hot, but they're warm. They're warm enough to eat and for it to be appetizing, but they're not hot. So right then and there, I knew, okay, like, my food had been sitting out for a long time. Number one, it had been taking way too long, but it had been sitting out for too long. But it was still appetizing, still delicious, but wasn't as hot as I wanted it to be. So he drops my food off, never comes back, you know, and I see him like walking around, interacting with other tables, and he had to have probably at least 6 to 7 tables. He had way too many tables, but one of the things that I was thinking about, excuse me, one of the things that I was thinking about is that there are waitresses and waiters that can actually have multiple tables. They can have up to 7 or 8, and they can manage those tables extremely well. A lot of waiters and waitresses may not be able to do that. So he was one of those that wasn't able to juggle in that way, you know. So time goes by, maybe like 30 minutes. I'm finished eating my food. Like, he's still going around all these tables. I just want my check. So I said, okay, it's been too long. You know, I had just been waiting, and I said, let me just give him like 2 more minutes to see if he comes, and if not, I'm going to have to go to the manager and be like, hey, like, I've been waiting here. So eventually he never came, and I never go to the manager, and I'm like, hey, I've been waiting here for like 30 minutes. Like, here, like, can I get my check? I tell her what I ordered, my table number, and she's like, okay, my apologies. I'll let him know. And I sit back down. You know, the manager had spoke to him. He comes back. He has an attitude, and he's just like, here's the check. And I'm just like, I look at him, and I'm just like, thank you. And like, you coming at me, and like, you've been being unprofessional all this time. So anyways, you know, I ended up leaving him a tip. He would have gotten a really good tip if he was well. I give people tips anyways, even if they're awful. They just don't get good tips as they would have gotten. So after that, I just kind of departed, and I thought about it, and I was like, wow, like, that is the feeling that I felt before him. You know, I had felt that even before he had walked over and he had presented himself. My intuition was already telling me, you know, your waiter's going to be iffy, he's going to be off. And in that situation, it's just like you have choices, or you have options. You know, you can either leave the restaurant, you can, I don't know, you can do whatever you want, but just know that it's just like, at that moment, your intuition is speaking to you, is communicating with you, and you have the choice to respond with in whatever way that you would like to. So that's one story. You know, it's easy for me to look back and think about it, but in that moment, I was just like, wow, it was a lot happening. So I'm going to go ahead and move to my next story, and this also happened in Arizona when I was living on the Navajo Nation. And this one was extremely interesting because at the time I was working at a school, and I was volunteering after hours. It was for the students' prom, and you know, I just got finished helping with cleanup and everything. And it was maybe about like 10 o'clock at night, and I lived back then in the desert, beautiful area on Navajo Nation. And when you would drive home at night, you couldn't see anything. So I got back home, and I'm like driving on the dirt road, coming down, going to my apartment. And for some reason, as I'm getting closer to the apartment, I just have this feeling in my gut, like this just unusual feeling. And I'm just like, what is happening? What is going on? And as I'm pulling up into the parking lot, I see like 7 cattle, and it's like 3 bulls, like 2 calves, like a few of the mothers, and I'm just like, wow, like this is legit a whole family of cattle in the parking lot. And automatically the bulls are looking at me, and they're just like don't come this way. Like, so I'm just like, wow, you know, I'm freaked out. I'm just like, what do I do? Like, I just want to get in my apartment, because the way that my apartment was set up is that the parking lot is on the outside, then there's a gate, and then you have to walk through that gate, and you have to walk through like a whole nother large lot, and then you have to go up some steps to get to the apartment. So at the area that the bulls were at, I would have had to walk past them to get to the main gate, which is basically a latch gate. I'm just like, oh my gosh. So I'm not scared of animals. I've done farming before, you know, I've ridden bulls before, and I was just like, you know what, like, one thing that I remember is that if you just kind of leave them be and you mind your business, you'll be okay. So I kind of waited for about 5 minutes. The suspension is just building up, and I get out of the car, and I just start walking slowly. Thankfully, at that moment in time, after waiting, they were far enough away where they weren't close to that main gate anymore. So they were kind of checking me out when I opened the door up, but I just kind of sped walk to the gate, made it, got in, and I'm like, yes. But once again, like the intuition, knowing that there was danger waiting, like my gut was telling me that before I had reached that parking lot. So I thought that was crazy. And, I'm glad that I was able to make it to my apartment, but definitely in that moment, I felt it, but I wasn't following it. So after I got back upstairs, I realized it like, wow, that was my intuition speaking to me. And I think that's something that we can all work on, even myself, is making sure that, okay, like when you have those feelings come up, immediately start to anticipate or start to say, okay, like what is it exactly that it's trying to tell me? So you guys, those are my intuitive stories. And I would really like to hear if you have any intuitive stories as well that tie into your intuition. So please like, subscribe, and drop your comments down below. Peace.